What's going on in my pants?
Now, the premonition of death, the warning from beyond the grave, that subtle but unmistakable whisper of impending death. So many claim that someone or something crossed the Great Divide to let them know that death was imminent. Some give it the name of a kindly relative, yet many claim that no matter what form it takes, it is in fact the angel of death. There were over 40 listed premonitions of the sinking of the Titanic, impossible premonitions, like the book written 12 years before the Titanic sank, where a ship called the Gigantic, the world's most unsinkable ship, hits an iceberg on its maiden voyage and sinks. The priest who saw the Titanic sinking in a dream and notified a newspaper who called him a mad old coot until the following day when the disaster occurred. Strangely, it's usually the people who have nothing to do with those that the premonition is about who have the most vivid and poignant experiences. Stephanie Thomas was 6 years old. She started crying whilst being put to bed, then began to tell her mother how bad men wanted to hurt people in a big house with 5 sides. Then the little mite said that there was a big number 11 that went right up into the sky. Inside, lots and lots of people were about to die. Her mother, Jackie Thomas, had never heard a little one talk like this before. Tried to calm her down, thinking that it was either a bad dream or something that she'd watched on TV. The child was screaming, "But lots of children have lost their mummies and daddies, and lots of people are dusty and they're coughing." Took her hours to get the child off to sleep. Imagine the next morning when a plane tried to crash into the Pentagon, a 5-sided house. Then the huge number 11, the Twin Towers, were hit by 2 other planes. Those nearby swathed in dust. Jackie Thomas was gobsmacked. The child never prophesied anything else, and now she's grown with a family of her own. The lists of remarkable prophecies seem to go on forever, but the one-off, totally proven vision is hugely common. At a family wedding being videotaped, the best man went around everyone just before the disco reception kicked in. His idea was to capture a movie snapshot of everyone who was there. It was going very nicely, with the groom's rugby club mates mooning for the camera, the grandparents crying, and then he asked the bride's sister for a word. She looked a little distressed and she had her head in her hands. And as they filmed on, thinking she was drunk, Catherine Gilmore said, "He's dead. Shit, he's dead. He's trying to walk away." Off camera, the best man, Anthony Gill, asked who was dead. "This man just walked up to him and shot him twice in the back, and 2 just under his shoulder blade. He's bleeding really badly. Help him! Help him!" The girl was sobbing. "It's his lungs! He can't breathe! He's made it inside, but he's collapsed. The blood is in a pool all around him. He's looking at her, and she's screaming, but he's dying! He's dying!" Then, as ironically Twist and Shout began playing on the disco in the background, Catherine said, "Someone's just killed John Lennon outside his home." So vivid was she that they all went up to a room in the hotel to check the television news. There was no mention of it. The wedding was on the 9th of December 1980. The following day, Mark Chapman killed him, and every move they made was consistent with her vision. A superstar's death, or world-changing events, or tragedies are a long way from the individual visitation of someone from the dark side to tell you that someone you love is about to die. How would you cope if somebody came to tell you that your 4-year-old daughter was about to die? Well, that's exactly what happened to Judith Gee of Houghton-le-Spring. She told the story. Sophie was my first and only child, and her father decided to cheat, eventually left us in 2004. 3 weeks after that, I was lying in bed, and I turned over to look at the curtains and jumped on seeing a figure standing there. I sat up and I reached for the bedside light, and I clicked it over and over again, but it didn't come on. I shouted, "Who are you?" The figure said nothing for a while until, in a whispered and croaky voice, it said, "We're taking your daughter." I was not about to let that happen, so I jumped up and I leapt at the figure, going through it. I hurt my chin on a dressing table, and yet somehow managed to run into little Sophie's room. To this day, I don't know if that thing was male or female. I squeezed Sophie so hard, I brought her into my room to sleep beside me. She never had a day's illness in her life, but by the weekend she was ill and yellow from jaundice. It's the only time that I've ever prayed. I've never been religious, but I begged God not to let anyone take my baby. The least cough in the night, and I would run in to check on it. 1 week to the day that thing visited me, I was sleeping, and Sophie suddenly kissed me on my cheek, and I felt a cuddle in. That I never minded. It was reassurance for both of us. And yet when I awoke, she was not there. When I went into her room, she was lying in a fetal position. I tried to wake her, I shook her, I screamed at her, but she was dead. They took my baby. Who are they? And why did they take my baby girl? Yet back in the 1980s, the Potts family of Wickham View may be the only people on earth who've rescued someone who has been named to die. Harry Potts was in his 70s, and following the death of his wife, his daughter Abby and her husband, Les Wilson, asked him to come and live with them. She had a big 4-bedroomed house on Ferguson's Lane. The 4 of them were happy together: Grandad, Mum and Dad, and little Jane, aged 5. Then one day, Harry was in the garden on a sun lounger next to Abby. It was a glorious Easter holiday, but Les had to work a Sunday service on the buses. Little Jane was messing around in a little paddling pool and kept filling it up over and over again with a tap from the hosepipe that trailed through the kitchen window. The only noise they could hear was the birds singing and a hiss from the hose with water trickling into the pool. At that moment, there was a growling whisper. Harry sat bolt upright, terror in his eyes, as his daughter Abby asked what was wrong. "Did you hear that?" he asked, and scanned the garden for any logical information. Abby seemed quite chilled about it, but looked rather more perturbed on seeing how this had affected her dad. "Did you hear what it said?" Her father was shaking. "Did it say Jane?" Abby said it could have. I was half asleep. What was it? Her dad said that he'd heard that thing 4 times in his life, and on each occasion someone died. I first heard it when I was 16, and I saw a dark figure in my bedroom, and it said, "George will be ours." 2 days later, my older brother, although he was at the peak of good health, died of a stroke. He was only 23 years of age. 3 years later, I was serving an apprenticeship to be a motor mechanic in Newburn when I was under a car, and I felt that someone was there. I slid out and saw a grey man with a beard in the corner of the dark garage. He looked as solid as you or I, and he said, "You know me, for I came to you once before. Well, I'm warning you that there is someone I must take, for they will seek to go. You must remember they want to go, and I will take them from you." By the time I got all of the way out from under the car, the figure had disappeared. I'd locked the door into the garage. There was no other way out. I raced home to see your mum. We'd just married, but she was fine. My dad was very, very ill with emphysema, and the hospital had told us he didn't have long. Now, although he'd never told me that he wanted to die, it was possible. So I washed up, and we both went up to my mother's, but they weren't there. Instead, we heard that an ambulance had been called. On contacting the hospital, Dad had died